Hi, Congressman Rob Menendez here, and have the honor of getting to spend some time with Ricky Williams, Heisman Trophy winner, former NFL running back, and for today's purposes, a dedicated mental health advocate. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So listen, just tell us about your journey to being a mental health advocate, and sort of people know your story, your career, but for you, just sort of on that journey, when you sort of realized you were dealing with your own mental health challenges, the barriers that you may have seen, and sort of how you came to this point of being able to be an advocate.
Yeah, it goes back to 2001. And I was playing for the New Orleans Saints, and I was having a really rough time. You know, my whole identity had been tied to being the best football player. Mm-hmm. And my first 2 years in the NFL, I kept getting hurt. And so I started to forget about who I was, and I just was really uncomfortable. And I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. Yeah, so the first, and it's always the first step, is I acknowledge that there was something going on. Mm-hmm. And next step, just as important, is I reached out for help. I called my best friend whose mother was a therapist, and I said, I need to talk to your mom. And within the first couple of sessions, I started to already feel better because I was getting to the bottom of stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, it was the first opportunity I had to give voice to what I was actually feeling. And what created that was a safe place to tell my story. And I called a good friend of mine after I started to feel better, and I just found inspired to get it out, because I imagined that there were a lot of other people going through something similar who weren't talking about it. So I did a story on Fox Sports, mm-hmm. where I came out with social anxiety disorder. And I remember the next day when I went to work, my coach invited me into his office, and he said, what's up with this social anxiety crap? You know, and that's when it hit me of, okay, there's gonna be some pushback to me telling my story.
Yeah, how do you feel that's changed over the last 20 years from when you came out and professional athlete, social anxiety disorder, to where we are today, sort of the progress that's been made, but still where you see some of these challenges?
I think one of the things that's driven the change is more people telling their story. So now in the NFL, in the beginning of the season, we have someone come and talk to the team, mm-hmm. and give us a hotline and give us an invitation, and they let us know it's confidential, so if you're dealing with anything, you have a place to go. So I think the leagues, the schools, bigger organizations are realizing that this is an important issue, and they're starting to take steps to make help more accessible to people and to normalize it. Mm-hmm.
And sort of thinking about sort of when you got to that point in your professional career and then looking back, sort of what do you envision being the resources that could be available to folks before they get to a crisis point? And what does that look like to you?
The way I think about it, it's storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I think the story that I was told is that being a role model meant I had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And I think if we start to tell different stories of being a role model means that you recognize when issues are coming up and you get help to deal with them. As a football player, one of the things that we have to learn day one is that we can't win a football game by ourselves, mm-hmm. that there are going to be challenges that we need help to overcome. And I think, again, the NFL has done a good job of letting the guys know that they have help for their on-field injuries, and they also have help for things that occur off the field.
And what is I'm thinking about sort of, we talk about mental health, but what's sort of when you think about what health in 2024 looks like, right? And sort of a holistic approach to it. Yeah. And what do you sort of see as the relation between physical health, mental health, and sort of how do you think about that?
Yeah, so again, my background as a football player, health was directly related to performance. Mm-hmm. You know, is that we were healthy if we were able to produce on the football field. And I sort of think of it that way in real life. And health means that you have the ability and the resources, inner resources, to handle whatever obstacles come your way. And I think the story building is starting to build people who are mentally strong. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is recognizing that in the course of all of our lives, there's going to be challenges that push us to the edge. And if we are strong enough to overcome those, we become better people. if we're not strong enough, then we typically invite some kind of mental health crisis where we have an opportunity to get stronger. For me, it's appreciating the long game, right? Realizing that, and that was part of my mental health crisis, is realizing I'm not going to be a football player my whole life. And if I don't start developing other skills and talents and abilities, I'm going to get to a situation where I'm in a difficult spot. That's how I've managed, or at least part of the way I've managed my mental health challenges, with that kind of attitude. And because I'm on the other side of it now, I can appreciate how different narratives would have been beneficial to me at a younger age.
For sure. And so like when you're engaging with folks, how important do you think it is for people to see someone like yourself be so open about their mental health challenges as they sort of deal with their own challenges that they may have?
As I was going through my mental health challenges, I realized I had an opportunity to be an example of someone facing their mental health challenges and coming out better on the other side. And so when I'm dealing with people, the first thing that comes across, and they usually say, is you feel very centered or very balanced. And so they are recognizing some level of mental health in me now. And so that makes it easy to go into precise detail about what I was struggling with. And I'll even share the details that most people don't share, because I think when I heard other people talk about their issues, that was the biggest help for me, because I think one of the biggest things is we feel so alone in our stuff. And once we realize that, everyone goes through these kinds of things, for me, that took 50% of the pressure off.
Right.
And it made it easier for me to sit with myself, because I didn't feel bad or wrong because I was having to do it.
It also creates more sympathy, right? Because when there's an awareness that if you have your own challenges, and there's a likelihood that someone that you're dealing with every single day has similar challenges, right? Like you can actually be more compassionate to them and compassionate to yourself.
Yeah.
And it creates just a better sort of environment for folks to feel more comfortable opening up, because there's a confidence that they're talking to someone who has their own challenges, may be different, but they understand as well.
Yeah. And also when I'm talking to people, I use a lot of football analogies.
Yeah.
I'll say when we had to play the Ravens, or we had to play the Giants or the Jets, they had really good defenses, is like we had to get up for that challenge. And so the idea of a mental health challenge, if we take it as a challenge and something that we can overcome, right? We're not starting from something's wrong with me, right? We're not starting from negative, we're starting from an empowered place. And I think shifting the attitude about mental health is extremely important.
Right, to reframing it, right, from like a barrier to happiness as a way to a challenge that once you overcome, you have had the success and you can be resilient to future challenges. Because like you can't, so one of the things I want to do is like, because I think this is such an important conversation for people to have, but what is sort of, if you went into a room right now with, let's say, high school students, college students, right? And you assume they're going to be skeptical about being open about mental health. What's your pitch to them?
I'd head on. I'd say, how many people in this room have had mental health challenges, right? And then I'd see how many raised their hands, and the ones that didn't, I'd say, you guys are all lying. Right? And then, I'd try to tell a story that helped everyone have identify with the relatable mental health challenge, and start there. Because I think once people can identify, and speak from that place, you said it earlier, compassion comes up, and sympathy. Yeah.
And, because we had a youth advisory council, it was all high school students. They were in groups and they chose a topic to present on a federal solution. And 5 groups, 3 of them chose mental health, because they see it as a challenge in their classrooms in high school, right? So we're getting better about the awareness, right? And now it's sort of creating the resources for folks at different stages in life. There's 988, which people can call if they're having a mental health crisis. What else, in your experience, are the tools that we should make readily available for people so that way they have the support that they need on their own journey with respect to their mental health?
All right, and so I'm assuming when you say we, the powers that be, right? It comes up a lot, and the most important thing is to listen, and to help people feel like we care. You know, because I think so many issues come down to us from the powers that be, you know, about what is right and about what is wrong. And I think sometimes it's hard for young people to trust that. And I think if we lead with different narratives, because the powers that be are the ones that really control the narrative. And I think having resources at all levels is important, especially now. But I think for the younger people into the future, we have to tell different stories. And I think the more people in power are willing to share their attitude and their experience, I think that's the number one thing that we can do. Because to me, dealing with people with mental health crisis, it's like they just want to feel like they're human. And to me, there's nothing more human than going through something difficult and coming out on the other end. It's like growing up, we heard about all the heroes, but in order for those heroes to get to that point, they had to overcome challenges. Right. And I think and you said it great, if we focus on overcoming challenges that prepare you for bigger challenges that are going to come later in life, then it helps us change our attitude about these mental health crises. Because for me, social anxiety disorder, right? There was a point in my life where I didn't even want to talk to my teammates. I wore a helmet during interviews, and because I faced it and I overcame it, now I can talk to stadiums full of people about very intense topics that most people are not comfortable talking about, and I can do it comfortably. So I'm in a better place to make a difference in my life and the life of other people because of that mental health crisis.
Yeah, in a way you're stronger, right, than when you were at this stage of your career, right? Because you've had this experience where you overcame these challenges and continue to work at it. Yeah. We were talking earlier about our kids. And I'm sort of curious, as a dad, how do you think about mental health, and I talk about it with my wife all the time about raising resilient kids, right? Yes. And like part of that means they have to face challenges, sort of like, so, because we're part of the Dad's Caucus and we're the chair of the mental health task force there. So just curious, as a dad, how do you think about engaging with your children on these issues?
Yeah, so exactly what you said. As a football player, of course, they preach resilience all the time. Yeah. So that's just been beaten into me. And so definitely resilience, but creating a safe place for my kids to express what's going on with them. Yeah. You know? And that's the important thing, because I think if we learn early in life that certain things aren't okay, right, as we get older, we have to deal with that. And so I try to create a place where my kids feel it's safe to come and talk to me about anything. But a big part of that is the example that I set for them. Is they see me and their mother having these kinds of conversations where we're talking about difficult things. Right. And so they're learning that it's safe to talk about these kinds of things. Right. Yeah.
It's sort of like how we, sort of keep making progress, right? Like as adults and as parents and ultimately as a society, is like we're sort of more open and transparent, right? And like trying not to always fit things into a defined box, right? But letting people have that experience and having their own journey.
Yeah, that's well said. We've been talking about this the past few days, but the idea of putting people in a defined box. What I've seen is at the core of so many mental health issues is people unsuccessfully trying to fit into the boxes that other people designed for them. And so I think for mental health, because when we say mental, right, this term mental health, it means a lot of things. On one extreme, it means suicide prevention. But to me, the other extreme, it means raising resilient young people that can handle the difficulties of life. Right. And so and I think as we're all growing together, we're all trying to embody those ideas and those principles. And so this idea of mental health, ultimately, I think it's about empowering people with the freedom to be themselves. Because mental is what's going on the inside, right? And I think the mental health issue becomes when what's going on the inside doesn't have an easy expression into the outer world, and so it gets like capped in here, and then eventually, for me, it overflowed. And so I think if there was more freedom, and there is more freedom now for what it meant to be a professional athlete, a male professional athlete, I would have had more freedom to be myself.
Right, and I think that's what I always think about, is sort of like the best version of any single person is their authentic self,
Yeah.
right? And they just need the encouragement and support to be that person, right? And something that even as a professional athlete, you may not have had in that moment when you needed it the most. And so some of this is just sort of breaking these barriers or these stereotypes that we've created and encouraging people to sort of go on their individual journey so they can reach their true authentic self.
Yeah. For me, that's at the core of mental health, at least for my experience, is the freedom to be myself.
Yeah.
Because as the freedom to be myself went up, my mental health issues started to diminish. Because issues come up, and when I say be myself, it means having access to all of the resources that are actually me. And those resources were the parts of me that help me overcome these things.
And it's almost like how you can envision moving this conversation from a crisis, right, which it is now because there's still stigma, access is still an issue, but how we can ultimately move this from a mental health crisis to an opportunity, right, to really amplify how we can create these healthy lifestyles for us by engaging in these conversations and by seeking out help and utilizing resources that are available to us. And it can be an opportunity, right, to really unlock all of our full potential.
Wow. Yeah, we got right to it, because on one end of the spectrum, it's a mental health crisis. On the other end, it's raising resilient people, it's resilient, creative people.
Right.
Because I think, when I see people who are being themselves and they're contributing something, usually those people are happy and fulfilled people, and their attitude to challenges is completely different.
Let me ask you a final question. What age would you go back to if you could have a conversation with yourself? What age would it be, and what would you say to yourself?
It'd be 15 or 16, and I would talk to myself about the future, because I talk to myself about the future. I'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I have a real life conversation about the obstacles that are going to come in my way in that process, and start to have myself prepare myself for those obstacles.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really appreciate you making the time. I really appreciate the conversation. Hope we can do this again, but it's been really fun having you.
Oh, this has been great. It's good to be around people who really care.
Well, likewise. Well, appreciate you making the time. I really enjoyed our conversation. Hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.